Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you'll have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level. Hey Vet Rehabbers, this week's episode we're sharing the first part of a webinar presented by Francisco Maia. He explores one of the most important and often overlooked topics I think in business, and that's money mindset. Now, Francisco unpacks how the way we think about our services, our value and selling, and how this can shape the success of our practices. He reframes selling not as taking money from people, but offering something that generally helps and adds value. And when we shift our mindset in this way, it becomes a whole lot easier to build a practice that is both impactful and sustainable. Now, Onlinepethealth members, if you'd like to watch the full webinar, you can find it in the members library, where Francisco goes deeper into the topic of pricing and guides you through how to confidently set your fees. Now, if you're not a member already, our amazing online community of vet rehabbers from all over the world, they gather in our Facebook groups. If you haven't joined yet, head over to Facebook and request to be a part of the action. Our groups include the small animal vet rehabbers, equine vet rehabbers, hydro vet rehabbers, and our business vet rehabbers. This is the one for those juggling patient care and running your own practices. We regularly share tips, advice, and host live sessions with experts to support you on your vet rehab journey. Now, a quick word from our sponsors before we dive into today's topic. At Paw Prosper, we believe true pet well-being demands a three-pronged approach: prevention, support, and rehabilitation. Our brands are trusted by veterinarians, universities, and rehab facilities alike. So whether you're looking to train, rehabilitate, or help your patients age gracefully, our brands Walking Pets, Help 'em Up, Respond Animal Therapeutics, Fit Paws, Muffins, Halos, Sleepy Pod, and Canine Cots offer effective, innovative, and proven solutions. You can sign up today to receive a one-time special gift for all our podcast listeners with your next order. Just head over to pawprosper.com/OPH. Right, over to Francisco.
Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome. Francisco, thank you so much for joining us. It is amazing to have you back with Onlinepethealth, offering additional training. So tonight we are going to be talking about pricing our services. And I think for all of us, it's actually a really personal issue. So I'm looking forward to learning from Francisco on this subject. It's something that's always needing more thought and a little bit of tweaking. So wherever you are on that journey, welcome. It's really, really good to have you.
Perfect. So I'll leave the chat up here so I can kind of like see it on my screen. So yeah, just a brief introduction about me in case you haven't come across, in case you haven't watched any of the trainings, that I have done through the years with Anae and Megan Kelly and the crew Online Pet Health. But I'm Francisco Maia. I am a physical therapist by training, got my bachelor's in exercise science from Indiana University in 2009. Then my doctor of physical therapy degree from University of Pittsburgh a few years later, and have been a CCRT now for 10 years. And almost 8 of those years, basically now, it's been running my own business, the Canine PT, which is started here in Chicago as a mobile business for the first couple of years until we opened our facility and have grown and expanded, and whatnot, basically through the years. In addition to all of that, I'm also a dad. I have like our dogs over there. Lieutenant Dan, he's the pit bull who is turning 10 actually in a few days. I almost forgot about that. He's turning 10 in a few days. Ringo, unfortunately, passed away last year, but he was almost 16 years old. He's our sheepdog. And then we have a fairly recent picture there with a whole crew now, because we have our daughter Susie, who is almost 4. She's going to be turning 4 in a couple of weeks. And then the new additions to the family, our twins, Lucy and Julian, who are 6 weeks old as of yesterday, basically. So fresh new additions to the family. Things have been a little chaotic, but lots of fun at the same time. So in addition to all of that, I also involved with the Illinois Physical Therapy Association. I'm the former president of the Animal Physical Therapy SIG with the American Physical Therapy Association. Have been a faculty for the CRI business course now for 6 years. Have had the Canine PT Academy, which is a separate business where I hope coach, mentor, canine rehab therapist in the business sides of things. Have our podcast, the Canine PT Academy podcast as well, with 160 plus episodes, and more recently too, becoming a book author. So for you guys who might not be aware, the third edition of the Canine Sports Medicine Rehabilitation books coming out next month. You can already pre-order on Amazon. And I actually co-wrote 2 chapters, one of them being the Business of Canine Rehab chapter, and the other one being the Evaluation and Rehab for Orthopedic Disorders of the Pelvic Limb. So wrote some business stuff and also some clinical stuff too, which was quite fun. People sometimes forget that I know clinical stuff too, right? I do a lot of stuff about business, about marketing stuff, but I also know a thing or two about the clinical sides of things. But that's me. And like I mentioned, I've been in the United States now, it's going to be 20 years now. 20 years, because I moved here in 2005 to go to college and ended up staying, met my wife and stuff, and ended up staying afterwards. First, let's start today by talking about selling. Okay, what is selling and why do we shy away from it? All right, and we got to understand that selling, even though sometimes we have a negative connotation to it, it's nothing more than nurturing, basically nurturing a relationship with a potential new customer. So it is about building that nurturing relationships with potential clients, so that way they understand the value that you bring to them. And in our case, of course, not the value that you bring to them, but to their pets' lives, right? Because we're dealing with, when I say client, by the way, I refer to the human, to the pet owner. When I say patient, for me, then I'm referring to the dog, to the pets. So selling is about that. It's about educating, nurturing, to help them understand why they should invest on us, why they should invest on your services, even though it may cost more than other options that they have available out there. And by other options, I don't mean necessarily like potential competitors or other providers around your area or anything like that, but think about other options that people just have available out there, right? So for example, if they're dealing with a dog that has arthritis, other options are pain medication, are Librela injection, are to just take it slow and not do anything, or standalone modalities, right? So not necessarily competition in terms of like other rehab facilities and providers, but general practice veterinary clinics offering standalone layers of therapy, or even sometimes, depending on where you're at, I would say non-qualified professionals offering standalone things like pain therapy or something like that, right? So not even people who have the skill set and the knowledge that we all have as canine rehab therapists, and like I mentioned earlier, even the traditional of like, oh, I'm just gonna wait and see how it goes, or one of my absolutely favorites, especially when it comes to post-op cases and a lot of TPLOs that we see, is telling us, well, I'm just gonna do some exercises that I found online, right? It's kind of like, okay, like, yes, there are exercises online over there, but we know, right, that what we do is not a cookie cutter approach. It's not a recipe that we can kind of like follow, that there is a lot of nuances to it. And it is on us to basically educate the pet owner about that. And that's where selling really, really comes into play. And one of the main things I wish you all to take away today is to start changing your perspective when it comes to that. When it comes to the fact that selling, it's not about taking money away from people, and it is instead about understanding that the monetary transaction associated with it, which is quite often the part that we tend to feel a little bit icky about it, is just a byproduct of something more valuable that we're actually providing to them. Okay. But to do so, we do need to understand, and if needed, confront any emotional components, any baggage that we carry ourselves when it comes to selling, when it comes to accepting money from people, when it comes to valuing ourselves, which I know it can be extremely challenging for a lot of us in the field. That was something that it was extremely challenging for me on those first few years of being a business owner. But that has been one of the coolest things about helping canine rehab therapists through the years is helping them break that mindset. So that way they start setting up the business to succeed, starting with a price point strategy that kind of like works for them, which is, a part of what we're going to cover today as well, of course. All right. So what we need to realize then is what selling is really about. Okay. We need to realize that selling is about helping people make a decision, and it can and it should be done in a professional and ethical way that puts their best interest at first, right? And that's the key word here, their best interest, okay? In addition to that, we got to pivot our thinking and see from a different perspective as well, kind of like in terms of like what that means. Meaning that if we have something that we know is of value to the pet owner and that it can help them, in our case, the services that we offer, the outcome that we provide through our services and whatnot, then it should be actually our duty and our ethical obligation to help them understand how we can help them through educating them, through informing them about what we do and how it can benefit them and their pets. And in the end, that's what selling is really going to be about. And on the other side, here's something that I often say to kind of like challenge our mindset a little bit to it, is that, as I mentioned before, if ethical selling is about their best interest, the pet owner's best interest, then when we shy away from selling someone on something that we know they need, just because we feel uncomfortable doing so, just because we feel icky or whatever it may be doing so, then whose interest are we really putting in at first? Right? Because if we're shying away from doing so because of how we feel about selling, then we're putting our best interest first. We're putting first our inability to work past any emotional component that we have attached to it, right? And that's why it's vital, all of us, not only to work on the tactical, the operational processes behind selling and figure it out, how much to charge and how to go about it and all that kind of stuff, but also on our mindset, also on our emotional attachments and the feelings that we might have towards money and towards selling. And I think that's usually, from my experience, the hardest part of all. The tactical part of it, once I help people through it, I think for them it makes sense. But that emotional component that they have towards that's usually the bigger barrier that we need to kind of like break through. Thanks, and I said that's profound. I can really resonate with that feeling. Yeah, it's, and I've been doing this and for 6 years now in terms of like coaching and mentoring canine rehab therapists. Started primarily with physical therapists that knew me, but since then have helped veterinarians, have helped chiropractors as well and stuff. And that is like across the board. Like there is across the board, no matter someone's background coming to our field, I tend to see that. And I experienced that too, and I don't have the time today to share all of that and stuff, but I've shared that many times in different trainings, in our podcasts and stuff, like how I had to break through that own mindset myself in the first year and a half of owning the business. So that way I could kind of like really get the business going, basically. But thanks, Annette. So if selling is about doing something for them, then the next question we should ask ourselves is then why do we shy away from it? If we know it's going to be of benefit to them, if we know that we have developed knowledge and skill set and we value ourselves, then why do we shy away from selling? And the way that we, and by we I mean like each individual, approach money and approach selling can have many different layers depending on a variety of different personal factors, to be quite honest, that are actually quite often intertwined with our upbringing, with our own childhood and how we grew up seeing money, basically. And that's, psychology and stuff. There's a lot of stuff kind of like behind it and stuff, but that really is something that carries over into adulthood in terms of like how we manage money, both on the personal level, how we manage money in our household and like that kind of stuff. But in our case, of course, translating that into business ownership, how do we view money, how we view selling in relationship to the business and how that impacts us, that kind of stuff. So there are many different layers that kind of like can be peeled basically behind that. But if we look at it with a little bit of more a focus on the business ownership and as a canine rehabpreneur, the answer of why do we shy away from it, it's actually quite simple, which is rejection. Rejection. And if we really look at it, it's not really so much that we don't value ourselves, that we don't understand all the work that took us to get to this point, the years of like studying, dedicating ourselves, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not much that we don't want to charge potentially more for our services, or that we don't understand our values and skills and what we bring to the table. It's actually that we don't want to find out that people don't want to pay for our services. And we don't want to feel rejected because of that. And that's that feeling of rejection. And I think even more so today, I know people from all over the world and stuff, but some areas more than others. Let's say the political climate that ties up to the economy, it's very, very shaky right now, to say the least. And I think that also brings another layer into it as well. So then we feel that way because when they reject us in terms of like reject what we're charging, reject our fees, it just makes us feel inferior. It just makes us feel defeated. It just makes us feel icky. And we fear, like being labeled as money hungry, or something like that. So because of that, our human nature becomes to avoid that at all costs, because our brain doesn't want us to feel uncomfortable. Our brain doesn't want us to feel defeated. So our natural response involuntarily is for us to protect ourselves, which of course is totally understandable. And the way we do so is then by starting telling ourselves like false beliefs, start telling things like, well, I'm not on this for the money, which is true. I don't think any of us got into this field for the money, but at the end of the day, we have bills to pay, we have maybe staff to pay, we have all those things, we have business expenses, right? So we tell false beliefs like that. We tell ourselves false beliefs that like, well, I don't want people to label me as money hungry, or I want to make sure that I'm making things affordable, which that's something else we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We start telling ourselves all these stories inside our head, basically to justify what we're feeling, and that's the part that is the hardest to move from, basically. All right. So, okay. So with that in mind, let's talk about money. Let's talk about ethical pricing, right? So is money the real issue in question? And the truth is, for most people, the answer is no. That's not the true concern for most people. It's actually the fear of spending that money and not being confident, not understanding how that's going to benefit them, right? And as you can imagine, the bigger that investment, the more we're asking from them from a financial perspective, the bigger that fear and the hesitation is going to be, right? It's the absolutely same thing with us. Think about it from an individual perspective. When you were buying different things for you, small or big, whatever it may kind of like be, the bigger the investment, the more research you do, the more you want to understand how is this going to work out. Just as a personal example, I was mentioning to Annette before we started the training, that with the twins and stuff, we bought a minivan, right? Because now as a family of 5, we needed more space, more room to fit everyone and fit everything when we go on a road trip to visit family. So that was a big purchase. So I, for a couple months or so, I did a lot of research online to try to understand what would be the particular minivan that will fit us better based on what our needs, based on price points. Do I want to buy a new one? Do I want to buy a semi-used one? If I want to buy a semi-used one, what kind of things do I need to look for? How do I get the best deals? And all that kind of stuff. So I spent time, invested time into understanding more about that, because it was a much bigger investment, compared to if I'm just spending, $10 or something on Amazon. It's like, I'm not even thinking about it. It's like, yeah, I need this. I don't need to read tons of reviews about it. It's $10, right? So the bigger the investment, the more people are going to need to understand where they're investing their money, right? And we got to understand then that we're selling them the value in terms of like what we bring to them. And we need to be able to show to them why what we have to offer is then worth the money that we're asking for. And I think, to be quite honest, that's where a lot of canine rehab businesses, being a clinic or being solo business, whatever it may be, fall short. Because I've seen this happen over and over again, where canine rehab businesses will raise their rates because they feel that push. They know they have to raise and things are costing more, whatever it may be. But they do so without understanding how it's going to affect the whole customer experience that people are getting with them, and how it's going to affect that whole nurturing and educational component and all that kind of stuff that we need to have in place, right? Because if we're raising the prices, especially by, a significant amount, but we're not changing any of those processes, then that's when there's going to be friction. That's when there's going to be pushback, because people are just not going to understand, like, okay, why is that more than what it was? Or why is that more than the other clinic that I called, and whatever it may be. So we need to have those processes in place to be able to educate them, to be able to show to them that it's just different. And that's where ethical pricing and selling really, really comes in place. And for that, it is going to entail educating. It is going to entail, if I had to define what ethical pricing is, it is about educating and influencing someone with integrity so that you can help them achieve a positive outcome that they would not be able to reach without you, right? So let's say again, ethical pricing is about educating and influencing someone with integrity so that you can help them achieve a positive outcome that they would not be able to reach without you, right? And if you really, really dissect and look at it, that is exactly what we're doing for our clients and for our patients. They can get a post-op rehab protocol from the surgeon, right? But we know that that's not the same. They can look up videos on YouTube or whatever websites and stuff about how to help recover their dog post-op TPLO. But we know that's not the same as working with you. Same thing is, other conditions, other issues that may arise. There are tons of resources out there nowadays to help people, but we know that's very different from working one-on-one with us, from us being able to meet them where they're at, develop and see through an individualized plan of care and all that kind of stuff, right? But for us to be able to show that value to them, we need to sell them. And that's what we should be selling. We shouldn't be selling, rehab. We shouldn't be selling physical therapy or physiotherapy or acupuncture, chiropractic, veterinary rehab, laser therapy, underwater treadmill. All of those things are just services or just things that we do, and not necessarily what we should be selling, because we need to understand that people don't understand what those things mean, and they don't understand how that's going to positively impact their lives and their pets' lives. So instead, what we need to be selling is clarity. What we need to be selling is certainty. What we need to be selling is confidence that we're here for them and we only want what's best for them and their pets, right? And along with that, we need to stop thinking that we're taking something away from them by collecting their money, right? Having that negative connotation with it. And instead realizing that we're giving back to them exactly what they need at that point in time on whatever journey they're on. If they're dealing with an older pet, if they're dealing with a CCL tear, if they're dealing with a hemianectomy rehab, a agility dog, whatever it may be. We need to realize that, yes, we're taking payment from that. Yes, we're taking money from it, but we're giving back something to them that it's exactly what they need, right? And that's part of the ethical selling process. Now, here's the common mental barrier we all face when it comes to it, which is worrying, what will people think about me, right? And I get that question all the time. But friend, I don't know, what are people going to think about me? And it's not just, in our head. It's like we worry about, What is our friends going to think about me? My family? What are the pet community, the local vets, my colleagues? Oh my God, what are my colleagues going to think about me? If I'm charging more than they're charging, whatever it may be. That's a very normal feeling, because like I mentioned before, our brain is wired to protect us from that rejection, protect us from us being labeled as something like money hungry or something like that, right? But this is where, honestly, I have to be as blunt as possible, that we need to stop worrying about what other people thinking about us, because no one else runs your business. No one else pays your bills. No one else is living your life. No one else has the same goals, the same aspirations that you want, not just for business, but life in general. Because for me, and if you've been following me long enough, for me, the business should be just a catalyst for that, should be a catalyst for us to be able to achieve what we want in life. And not only that, not only we should stop worrying about that, but we need to understand that the same way that we are worried about other people and what they're thinking about us, research in psychology does show that other people are actually also worrying about the same thing. Meaning we're worried about what they're thinking about us, and they're worried about what we're thinking about them, right? Meaning that they're not thinking about like us in terms of like, look, a friend, I can't believe he's doing this and stuff. No, they're more worried about what I'm thinking about them, right? So it's kind of like an interesting dichotomy if you really kind of like think about it, that in reality, no one really cares, because we're here worrying about other people thinking about us, when in reality, they're just too busy worrying about themselves, right? I think especially in today's world, we're all just really worried more about ourselves more than anything else, right? So that's something else that kind of like, at least for me, when I was told that, when I read about that, I was like, oh my God, that is so true. Why am I worrying so much about what other people are thinking about me, when in reality, like they got their own problems that they're dealing with? Worrying about me is probably like the last thing on their mind right now, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing that people worried about is potential clients, right? It's like, but friend, like, what will potential clients think about? What if they're calling, another clinic, and then they're calling me, and they kind of like, they see, the price difference and all that kind of stuff. Or what if they don't like? What if they don't like the fact that I'm talking and educating and selling them on the phone, right? Because keep in mind, selling is about talking, educating, building their relationship. So we need to be spending time with them on the phone, and then afterwards, of course, in person, going through that process, right? So what if they don't like that? What if someone is contacting us and they don't want to spend time on the phone discussing things, and instead they're just price shopping? Instead, they just want to know how much we're charging. First of all, what we need to ask ourselves, is that really the type of client that we want to work with anyways? And second, understanding that if anyone has a problem with the way you operate your business, with the way you operate your life, with you actually trying to help them, try to educate them, giving your time away to help them out, if they have a problem with that, then the odds are that the real problem is not with them. It's not with you, but it is with them. It is something else completely beyond our control, something else that they're dealing personally, that they're dealing in their own lives, or whatever it may be, right? So as harsh as that may sound, the best thing we can do is just let them go. We can't help everyone. We can only help the people who want to be helped by us. And once we shift that mindset, it's for me, it's something that it's groundbreaking almost. It's just such a relief that there's like, oh my God, yes, I don't have to help everyone. Because that's a challenge that we face, no matter if you're coming from a healthcare background as a physical therapist, as a physio chiropractor, or if you're coming, as a veterinarian to the canine rehab world and stuff. Like, that's something that we all tend to carry with us so much, that we just want to help. That's within our nature. That's why we got into this field, right? Because we wanted it to help. And we feel that burden that we should help everyone, that we should help every pet, but we can't. We can only help those who want to be helped by us. All right. And then finally, before we move on to the next slide, understand that we need to build a business that fits what we want in life, and not a business that takes away from us, not a business that drains us or over time just lead us towards burnouts. And we're only going to be able to keep helping our clients, to keep helping our patients in the long run for years and years to come, hopefully even decades, if we put ourselves and if we put our needs first and build a business that helps us accomplish just that. And whether we like it or not, however we feel about pricing and stuff, our price structure is going to dictate the type of business that we have, right? Personally, I want my clinic to be known in our community for the outstanding and beyond expectations customer service that we provide from the very beginning to the very end, and not as the Walmart of canine rehabilitation, right? And I don't know I think Walmart is global, right? But Walmart is just the high volume, cheap stuff, like that kind of stuff. Like, I don't want to be the Walmart of canine rehabilitation, because it's a different experience that people are going to get if they go there. And I hope that after today, you feel the same way too, because we all have worked incredibly hard to build this knowledge, to build the experience that we have as canine rehab therapists. But we need, as a collective, as a whole, do a much better job valuing ourselves and valuing the services that we have to offer. All right. So before we jump into setting prices and more the tactical part of it and whatnot, any questions?
I feel like I need to raise my hand. So while you were speaking about what should we be selling, I will often come up against this, I'll get into this loop or this trap or this pattern where I'm saying, okay, well, I need to raise my prices, but if I'm going to raise my prices, I should also, especially if I'm going to raise my prices significantly, then I also have to do something to change my offering significantly.
Yeah.
So it's of higher value, right? So things that I've thought about is like the software that I'm subscribed to, or the client education processes, or little things that I could be doing or giving with clients. Generally, they're things that cost more money and cost more time and effort from my side, which then sends me into a spiral of, but I can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
And so should I be raising my prices because it just doesn't make sense? And so I feel like that's a real trap because it stops me from taking action. And I shouldn't be raising my prices because I'm adding something more. I should be doing it to support the greatness that I already am, right? So I don't know if you could address that a little bit, because I can't be the only one who gets into that loop or
you're
trap.
not. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely are not. And yeah, we're going to talk next about pricing. So it's a great segue. But then before I do so, yeah, that's a real feeling. I see that all the time, right? People will tell me things like, well, Fran, I know I need to raise my price, but right now I'm finishing this extra certification in whatever, or I'm doing this course in whatever, that it's going to make me a better clinician. And then I'm going to feel comfortable doing so. Or a piece of equipment. It's like, oh, Fran, I'll raise my price once I can add, now the shockwave being probably the biggest one. Once I can add shockwave therapy, then I'm going to raise my price, right? And it's that gets back into a false belief that we think that for us to be able to do so, raise prices, for us to be able to do so, that we need to offer more. Right. Or sometimes people are like, well, if I'm going to raise my prices, I'm going to extend the length of my sessions or whatever it may be. Right. So those are all kind of like, mindset traps that we do kind of like tend to fall within. So definitely you're not alone on that. And that's why it's important not just focus on the tactical part of like, okay, how do I go about raising my prices? How much I should be charging? How do I let people know? And all that kind of stuff, but the emotional component behind it, because that's going to be the thing, like I said earlier, that it is going to hold back. And the truth is that if we can help people achieve what they want to accomplish, right, then we shouldn't necessarily have to wait to charge what we feel we should be charging, or to raise the fees every so often, and that kind of stuff. right? And I think that that's the part of it. I think, and that's why sometimes when people tell me that, they're like, well, I'm going to raise my fees once I finish this extra certification. And if I know them well, if this is a coaching client, I tell them, quite honest, is like, no, you won't. Because I've seen this happen where what's holding it back, it's not the certification itself, it's the mindset. It's us feeling that we're not worth it yet of raising our prices. And then there is that gap, basically, between what we think we're worth it and what we think we should be charging. And then when people get into this habit, basically, of just getting more and more training and stuff, right? Which there's nothing wrong with becoming, more knowledgeable and stuff, but thinking that, well, I need more training, I need more certifications, I need more letters behind my name to feel worth it, then that gap gets wider and wider. Because if we're not working on our mindset, if we're not working on our imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff, but we are adding more to our clinical knowledge, that gap is going to get wider and wider. So that's why I say that usually, no, people are not going to raise the rates, because they're going to feel even more uncomfortable basically doing so, because it's all over here. It's all like what we're telling ourselves when it comes to it. So it is challenging. Especially, like I said, us coming into this field with, being such empathetic individuals, being, putting ourselves in our clients' shoes and all that kind of stuff, and wanting to help everyone. So it is honestly like a hard mindset to break through and stuff. But honestly, it is something, especially for those of us who are solo, who are on our own, or just have a very small team, and we're the ones that primarily see the patients and stuff. That's sometimes even harder to kind of like break it, because then we have an even stronger emotional attachment, to our business and stuff, which it also complicates things, if that makes sense. But yeah, so let's go through this slide, and then, sorry, were you going to say something on there?
I said thank you. I thought you were waiting for me to say thank you.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you wanted. I was kind of, but yeah, but I couldn't see you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so yeah, let's go through this, and then we're going to wrap it up afterwards with some more tactical stuff and whatnot. How we're doing? Yeah, we're doing good on time. All right. Now, before we move away from the emotional stuff behind pricing and stuff and get into the more tactical stuff, let's talk about what is price, right? Because price is simply a byproduct of emotion. And we need to remember that it's not our price that is in question, but it's actually how people feel about that, right? So it's not our price that is in question, but it is how people feel about that price, if it's worth their investment. And the good news, if you are a glass half full kind of person, the good news is that how we allow people to feel about it, it is within our control. That's where marketing and that's where selling comes into place, especially when they go hand in hand. Because without it, then it becomes harder and harder to justify higher prices. And that's when we start getting that pushback and stuff. It's like when when people just feel like they don't feel value, basically, right? So when people feel like, well, prices are just getting raised around me, or one of my biggest pet peeves too is when businesses in general blame, them raising their fees, on outside sources. It's like, well, it's like I have gotten so many of those emails from different software companies and stuff. It's like, based on, the cost of running the business and this and that, blah, 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 we're raising the plans by 10%, by 15% and stuff. And that just feels so impersonal, right? And that's kind of like, beyond kind of like the point over here, but we shouldn't be needing to justify higher prices. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say, because if we are trying to justify higher prices, that's where the friction is going to come in, and we need to understand that it's about educating, it's about nurturing and helping people understand that what you have to offer is different. The experience you have to offer is just different. Even if it's a clinic, even if it is compared to someone else providing the same service, providing the same modality of treatment, right? Once again, just because I go grocery shopping at Walmart, it'll be a very different experience than going grocery shopping at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or whatever it may be, right? And there's going to be people that are going to go to both locations, and they're both successful in their own way. And we need to remember that if our canine rehab business is not the same as the business as the clinic down the street, then why should we charge the same? We also got to remember that if we're not providing average canine rehab services, then why should we charge average canine rehab prices, right? If we're not average, then why are we charging average? If we invested in ourselves, if we know we can really make a positive impact, then we need to take that into consideration. Now, getting to the more technical things, when we really look at it, there are basically just a few different ways that we can grow revenue inside any business, right? It's getting more from clients. It is getting more from current clients, meaning kind of like upsell them, sell different stuff, products, that kind of stuff, or charging more for what we provide, right? So it is getting more clients, so increasing our caseload and that kind of stuff. Getting more from our current clients, so maybe offering add-on services, selling things on top of it, selling rehab products, selling supplements, that kind of stuff, or charging more for what we already do. When you really look at it, those are the three main ways that we can grow the business when it comes to revenue. Now, when you look at those three options, charging higher prices is going to be the fastest and most efficient way to do so. Yet, even though that is the case, it is the last one out of those options that people tend to look into when trying to figure it out how to make their canine rehab business maybe more profitable, more sustainable, whatever it may be, right? And the reason behind that is all those emotions and all those feelings that we talked about that we associate with money, with raising fees and that kind of stuff, right? And like I said, I have been mentoring since 2019, different canine rehabpreneurs into doing this and stuff. And I cannot tell you how many times folks who think of every option out there to grow their revenue, such as running promotions, running sales, increasing the caseload, adding more hours, adding more staff, trying a variety of different marketing strategies to get the caseload busier, whatever it may be. They will think of everything. They come up with all these ideas, but what they're not doing is understanding that all of those things are not going to be as efficient as just adjusting the price structure. They're going to think of all these options and many others, and will more often than not avoid the one that deep down they know is what they should be doing, which is adjusting their price point, but they feel uncomfortable about it. So because they feel uncomfortable about it, we think of different things that we can kind of like do and stuff, which is not to say that those things cannot work, right? But is that the most efficient way of us doing so? And they do so for a variety of reasons, but a big one is because they think that if they charge more, then they're going to be attracting less clients, or even worse, that they're going to get lots of pushback on their price and whatnot, right? But let's ask ourselves, are people buying primarily based on price? And the truth is that no. For the most part, people do not buy primarily based on price. Otherwise, we would all be buying the cheapest stuff available. Now, is there a certain percentage of the population that do so, all the couponers and all that kind of stuff? Yes. But the research does show that that's only account for about like 15% of the population, right? So that means we're always still going to be getting phone calls from folks who are indeed price shopping, who just want to know how much you're charging, who are just going to go with the cheapest option available. But we need to remember that that's a smaller portion of the population, and that just because someone is asking about our price, it does not mean that they're questioning our price. It just means that they're looking for that proof of value, that they're trying to understand, okay, what am I going to get from this relationship, basically, that they're looking to see if it's worth their investment or not. And we got to remember also, it's not just the monetary investment, right? Of course, we're talking about selling and pricing and stuff. So of course, there's a bigger focus on the monetary investment component of it, but it's also the time investment. Like, we're all busy. We all have life. We all have work. We're all trying to juggle multiple things on a daily basis and stuff, right? So suddenly, if I'm going to take my dog for rehab, I want to make sure that also my time that I'm investing, it's worth it, that I'm going to get what I'm kind of like, looking for. And going back to what we said in the beginning, how do we offer value? It's by focusing on educating them on the outcome that we provide and not the services, not on the things that we do. It's by focusing on how we can help them along this journey that they're on with their pets, and not necessarily on our credentials, not necessarily on all the equipment and the bells and whistles that we have available at our clinic. And if you really start diving even deeper in terms of the value, it's going to come down to the experience, to the journey, to the customer journey that they're on with you. And deep down, really, really looking at it and dissecting things, that's when a lot of businesses, not just canine rehab clinics, but of course we're talking about canine rehab over here, that's when a lot of businesses struggle quite often with the price rise, because they fail to take the customer journey, the customer experience into consideration. And it's like people are going to be willing to pay more as long as they understand that they're getting a different level of experience, right? And it doesn't mean that they're getting more, like we talked earlier, based on the next question, more in terms of like what is being offered or more time with you and like that kind of stuff. That's not what the more means. It just means more about like in return that they're getting from the overall experience that they're getting with you, right? So people are not buying based primarily on price. Then let's talk about how do we should determine our prices, right? And we're going to dive into the next slide, which is going to be the wrapping up one, a little bit more the technical way. And I'm going to share with you guys a resource that you can use it to try to figure out on your end how to potentially set your prices. But usually speaking, I have found there's been two ways primarily where canine rehab therapists set their prices. One of them is looking at the competition, and then based on that, picking how much to charge. Usually based on average. It's like, yeah, I'm looking at these different clinics around me. They're charging, one of them is charging 100, the other one's charging 70. So I'm just going to go and charge 85. I'm just going to go right in between, charge average and stuff. Or just going right below. It's like, yeah, I'm looking at the competition and this clinic that has been around for 10 plus years. They're charging 100. So I don't feel I'm as good as them because I haven't been around that much. So I'm just going to charge 90. I'm just going to go right below them. Right? But once again, what kind of service are we providing? Are we providing average services? Right? Are we providing below average services? We're not. So that, of course, is a fallacy in terms of like how to set prices. And to be quite honest, that's how I set up my price in the very beginning, back in 2017, when I started my business. That's exactly how I did. I looked at the competition. I looked at the clinic where I worked at for a couple of years. They had been on business at that point for about like 12, 13 years or so. And I was just like, let me just charge slightly above. And I went above because I was doing house calls. I was like, well, if they're charging this much, I'm going to charge just slightly above to account for the fact that I'm going to people's homes, and I shared this in other platforms. But basically, as I learned more about pricing, as I learned about all this stuff over the next 15 months, I had to raise my fees 4 different times because I've realized each time that was not enough. That was not enough. That was not enough. So, but that's what I was doing. That's the mistake I was doing. The second way that usually we tend to set our fees is coming out with a number that we feel comfortable with, but without taking any consideration behind it in terms of like the cost of operating the business, what we want from the business, or anything like that. It's like, I feel comfortable with this number. I don't know how I came up with this number. It's just a number that I feel comfortable with, right? And as you can guess, also not a good way of kind of like going about it. Now, here is something else that we need to understand and get comfortable with, is that we can let the clients actually make the decision on how much they're willing to pay, not us, right? And now, of course, I'm not saying that we're literally doing that, right? Telling people, yeah, just pay how much you want to pay. But we got to understand that we are too involved with the business. We have that emotional attachment to a business. And what I mean by that is that we're not going to know how much people are willing to pay unless we're willing to test those prices. And true story, but nearly all clients I have helped through the years, which have been in the hundreds, they have raised their fees, have done so with very little to no pushback. Not only that, but the feedback I get quite often is that people become amazed of how welcoming their clients actually are, that they're finally raising their fees. People will literally tell them, it's like, oh yeah, it's about time you're raising your fees. Like literally, like that happens all the time. Because people, if you bring the right clientele, people want what's best for you. They value you for what you do and for who you are, right? And if that's the case, they're going to understand that, like, yeah, prices need to go up every so often. Prices need to be adjusted and stuff. And it is the nature of operating a business. All right, so please don't think that it can be done, because I have the proof through not just my own business and stuff through the years, but the numerous canine rehabpreneurs who I have mentored, to do so. And I say that because it can be so easy for us to get caught up on our own minds, to get caught up on the hamster wheel that maybe we hear even from other business owners when it comes to like setting fees and stuff, where we're telling ourselves those false beliefs, telling ourselves all those things that like, oh, it's wrong for us to charge more. I didn't get into this for the money. There's no money in canine rehab. I just want to be able to help more people and stuff. Like if you start putting around the circle, where that's the conversations you're having with friends and colleagues and stuff, then that's just going to get in your head more and more. And it's going to be even harder to come out of it. So who you surround yourself with also is going to play big dividends in terms of like expanding your view when it comes to that. Basically, that's kind of like what I mean by it. I just wanted to say a couple more things. First, whether we like it or not, price is going to be a statement of value. Price is one of the best and easiest ways to differentiate ourselves, right? Why is that? Because even when we don't charge enough, people are going to think that there must be a catch. Oh, this is too good to be true. How can this person be the best in what they do, but they're also one of the cheapest? It's like, there's a catch. There's something wrong, right? And if something is too good to be true, people are going to think there must be something wrong. And we need to be careful about that. Not only that, but also people choosing you because you are the cheapest option is also not a great way to run a business, right? Personally, I don't want to be known as the cheapest option for canine rehab in the Chicago area. I want to be known as the best, right? And that's going to come at a different level, right? Because if I'm the cheapest option, that's going to attract a different type of clientele that don't necessarily appreciate us as much as I would like to, who don't necessarily value us as much as they should value us, right? And we all should build a business surrounding ourselves with people who value us for what we do, right? And then let's talk about affordability and accessibility. Because then that's where a lot of people tell me, it's like, but Fran, I want to make my canine rehab services affordable. I want to make them accessible. And I get that. And I really respect that thought, because it shows kind of like our empathy. It shows how noble we are with what we do and how truly passionate we are as canine rehab therapists. But when we really think about that, what does that really mean? What does it truly mean to be affordable? What does it truly mean to be accessible, right? Being affordable, it's going to mean something completely different from one individual to the other. And in my opinion, it's not up to us to decide for them what they think should be affordable, because just like we have our own emotional bias and whatever towards money, people are going to have their own too. So we're not going to change that. So it's not up to us to decide for them what they can afford or not, right? Not only that, but what if we make it affordable to them in other ways? For example, in the veterinary world nowadays, especially with the costs going up over the last several years, more and more popular options like care credit or scratch pay and a few other similar options where it allows people to basically extend their payments are becoming more and more common. And personally, I don't use those companies because their business model is very questionable and it's not something I want to be connected with. But can I do something similar and offer other options for our clients to help them split the payments, to help them extend the payments for the rehab package to be able to make that more affordable? right? That would be more affordable. I'm still charging the same, but instead of them paying in a lump sum for a rehab package, we're letting them pay over a few months period, right? That's making more affordable. And I know that works because that is basically the way I have structured our business now. So we have thousands and thousands of clients through the years that have told us exactly that, have told us that I really appreciate that you have this available because I just spent thousands of dollars on TPLO, on hemianectomy, and I want to be able to afford this. And you're making it possible for me to do so. Wonderful. It's helping them and it's helping me, right? So that's what I mean by like, what does affordability really means? And it's the same with accessibility. If we want to be more accessible and we actually want to offer more pro bono work and that kind of stuff without feeling guilty, then generating more revenue through our regular clients is actually going to be the best solution for it. Like a lot of us want to be able to do more pro bono, whatever it may be, but we feel guilty about it because we feel like it's just taking away, whatever it may be, kind of like stuff. But once you structure your business in a way that you don't feel guilty about it, then it's going to be even easier for you to become more accessible when it comes to that.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Paul Prosper. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free, so please go and check them out, paulprosper.com. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit. It's on Saturday, the 31st of October, 2026. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Online Pet Health members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com. And if you want access to our free membership, we update the webinars in this area every 3 months. You can sign up at onlinepethealth.com/free.